Chicago is in the grips of a crime wave, with police warning residents of a spate of carjackings and robberies. Last week, we showed you what was being dubbed the teen takeover, as hundreds of young people took to the streets, looting businesses and violently attacking innocent locals. When will the issue be addressed? Well, to discuss this, I am joined by author and Fox News political analyst Gianno Caldwell. Gianno, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Now, firstly, what is your reaction to what is happening in Chicago right now? You grew up in Chicago. That's your hometown. It must make you sick.
I mean, I got to be honest with you. I'm absolutely disgusted with what I'm seeing in my hometown. I'll tell you that it isn't as unusual as some may suspect as they look at their television screens across the world and see these teenagers who came by the hundreds. The Chicago Police Department even said that there may have been over 1,000 people, 2 teens shot. And then you see the response from those in leadership, i.e., Lori Lightfoot, who's the current mayor of Chicago, who was defeated because of her soft on crime policies. And then you have Brandon Johnson, who's the mayor-elect, who's soon to take that role, who's apparently more progressive and soft on crime than even Lori Lightfoot is. This really, really impacts me, my life, my family, and hurts to see this kind of stuff going on with our leadership, especially knowing that my baby brother Christian, was murdered last year in Chicago, June 24th, teenager innocently just outside of a venue where multiple people were shot. This is disgusting. The response from the leadership was reprehensible, and it needs to come to an end, but it's going to take those folks in Chicago to let their voices be loud and known that they will not stand for this with the new leadership coming into the city of Chicago.
And Gianno, I mean, your story, your family's story, it's shocking, it's horrible, and it's tragically been repeated time and time again across that great city, which is a wonderful city in a lot of ways. I love Chicago. But what is happening, though? Why do they keep voting? Why do Chicago residents keep voting for the same thing over and over again? And I want to ask you, too, why aren't Republicans able to provide a good alternative candidate to potentially get people to vote for an alternative and win the people who are being hurt most by these soft on crime policies, particularly Black Americans, Black residents of Chicago?
That's a great question, a great multi-part question. In fact, I'll tell you the reason why people, I believe, in part vote for the same folks over and over again is those are the people who routinely showed up. You're talking about Democrats who show up around election time, do nothing for the residents there, and blame someone else when they need their vote again. And it's been a cycle that's worked, honestly, whether it be in the city of Chicago, New York, or anywhere across the United States of America. That has been the case, especially when it comes to Black voters who are typically more interested in those Democratic politics because those are the people that they see. They know Black folks that are there. Paul Vallas happened to be the candidate, the opposition candidate, if you will, who was pro-law enforcement, who was pro-soft on crime, who was pro-law and order, who was also pro-charter schools and fiscal responsibility, was considered by a number of folks within the city of Chicago to be the conservative or Republican candidate when he's been a lifelong Democrat. What has happened within the United States that if anyone's talking about being tough on crime, if anyone's talking about being law and order, they're now being perceived as a conservative Republican, which makes no sense to me because when I was growing up, everyone, no matter what party or ideology in which you had, it was considered the norm that each party would be considerate of safety, as that is the first role of any elected official in that kind of position, executive position, whether you be a mayor, whether you be a governor, whether you be a president. Life and liberty, the pursuit of happiness should be paramount, but especially life, protecting those lives. But we've not seen that. We've seen people who have said that this was criminal justice reform, when I would argue that what we've seen, these policies, these progressive policies, be justice for the criminal. We have in the state of Illinois, they have a new law that's coming out, which is going to make a number of crimes where you would normally be held, that would require you to post bail in order to get out of jail. These are going to be non-detainable offenses, including second-degree murder. So
Wow.
this is astonishing, I think, for a lot of folks, but it just continues to get worse. And folks aren't necessarily waking up when we know that a lot of family members are being murdered in the city of Chicago. So it's going to take a vast group of individuals all across the city of Chicago, because crime used to be concentrated on the south
Mm.
side of Chicago and the west side of Chicago, where mostly minorities, African American, and Hispanics live. Now it's gone into the places in which you may visit, downtown Chicago. Your viewers may visit as well. Downtown, North Side, Gold Coast, Loop. All of those areas are no longer safe. So it is a shock, I'm sure, to a lot of people that may be watching, but this is the state of reality for many folks within the city of Chicago, especially those who are poor, minority, who cannot afford to get up and move like a lot of other people have.
Well, I mean, Gianna, look, the last time I was in Chicago was about 5 or 6 years ago, and I remember going from a wedding that we were attending to our hotel, and our taxi had to divert because police were investigating a shooting that had just happened on the street where we were just trying to drive down. But nationally, I know exactly what you're talking about. And nationally, though, how does this play out? Because Joe Biden, and you've written a book called How Conservatives Can Win Back Black America. Joe Biden
taking for granted how conservatism can win back the Americans that liberalism failed.
Yeah, it's a brilliant title, and everybody should have a look at this because it lays out a program for this. Joe Biden makes a big push for the black community, the African American community. Donald Trump did well last time around. How is that playing out going into the next year's election?
So when we're thinking about 2024, I don't think you can look at it through the lens of 2020, 2022, or even 2016. I don't think you can look at it through that lens. Within America, I think Americans are so polarized. They wanted Trump gone because of his bombastic kind of personality. Maybe they liked the policies, that maybe they didn't like how he moved on COVID with some of his public comments around COVID-19. People were afraid. They were scared. Joe Biden said that he was going to be a safe haven for all Americans. He said that he was going to get the economy back on track. He said that he was going to make sure that people were safe again, and none of those things ended up being true. We now have inflation at a 40-plus year high. We now have wages, which have actually had gone up, are now suffering because of inflation. We have crime that is occurring in just about every major jurisdiction: New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Baltimore. Many of the places in which many of your viewers have either been to or have heard of are now considered very dangerous places where visitors should not go. This election, whether it be a primary between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, or maybe someone else comes up from behind, and then a general election, which would certainly be Joe Biden, whoever that Republican is. Joe Biden doesn't have a record to stand on in a way that he may have had when he was talking about he was vice president for Barack Obama, when he was a U.S. senator. He doesn't have that anymore. He now has a record as a United States president, which many residents throughout the United States of America don't want to see him win or run again. You got an NBC poll that just came out last week showing that 70% of American voters, whether they be Democrat and Republican, do not want to see him run for that office again.
And that is
an insane number for a person to be running for re-election as the president of the United States of America.
That is just shocking. Gianna, thank you so much, Gianna Caldwell, for joining us. Hope to talk to you again soon.